Dzień dobry.
Hallo?
Dzień dobry.
Oskar pyta o miasto, Fundacja Napraw Sobie Miasto. Dzisiaj rozmawiamy z Niną Peters i Harrym Sachsem z kooperatywy Haus Der Statistik z Berlina i będziemy sobie mówić o projekcie właśnie, który się tak nazywa, Haus Der Statistik, który jest przebudowaniem, przemodelowaniem dawnego budynku Instytutu Statystyki w Berlinie na w sumie coś innego. So, let's start from the beginning, because what is Haus der Statistik, like historically? Because it's like a building in Alexanderplatz in the very heart of Berlin, and what was then like in the communist era?
Well, it was one major representative building, House of Statistics. So it was basically around 50,000 square meters of administration. I think all the big economic plans of the 5 years economy was basically done in that house, or at least was generated there. And so it was not a very open house, but it was a very active house in terms of numbers, statistics, and paperwork, let's say.
And it was active until like a wall collapse or even longer?
Well, I guess until 89 for sure. 89. And then at some point, I can't really tell you when it was completely closed, but then early in the 90s, Bundesamt der Statistik, which is like the Western House of Statistics, moved in, but they didn't need the same size, but they were occupying parts of the whole house building complex. And then also the Gaukbehörde moved in, which was like one big office that tried to analyze what the Stasi basically had, and they were discovering everything and trying to make it public and transparent.
Yeah. And I saw on your lecture was the information that it was like empty for like 11 years or so.
Yeah.
Because you started your project like in 2015, and so it was like 2004 it was closed completely.
2008, it was closed like completely.
Oh yeah, it's 11 years until today.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So who was the owner? Because it was like this statistical institution, and then it was like a government building, or who was the owner?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, first it was the property of the GDR, no, and then it went into the property of the Federal Republic of Germany, and like a state-owned company called the Beamer was kind of in charge of the building, and now the like also a communal company which is in charge of all properties of the city of Berlin took it over.
Yeah, because my question, because it comes from like in Poland, all these huge empty buildings in the very city center of like a capital, which is Berlin, like or also in Warsaw, that will like sold immediately just to be demolished. And like the question is how it happened that it's stayed in this like a empty thing like in the capitalist world. So how it happened?
I think it's a funny coincidence because since 2008 it was empty and it was difficult to sell because it was so huge. And also it was owned by the federal state, but the parking place on the backside was owned by the city of Berlin. And it was so close that none of the two owners could do anything without the other one. So it needed a common plan. And as the federal state and the city of Berlin had permanently many issues with each other, it took a long time to develop a collective plan for it. So the idea was those times, let's develop a plan, and then together with the plan, let's sell it for the highest bid. And this took such a long time that even until 2015, the final plan was ready, but it was not sold yet. and that gave us an opportunity for our campaign to become successful.
Yeah. So now, because you mentioned your campaign, and like let's talk about a little bit about this, because your main idea in 2015 what was just to show this huge empty building in the heart of Berlin, or what?
No, our idea was together with the Alliance of Threatened Studio Houses to show that Berlin needs open production houses in the city center anywhere. And we wanted to show that everything is under threat, especially cultural infrastructure, social infrastructure. And we want to campaign for the need of such spaces. And we choose the Haus of Statistics because this was the most central and biggest potential space that could be used for that. And that was still in public ownership. So it was basically theoretically possible to negotiate it here, while with all private spaces, usually there is no chance because every investor would ask for such high money that no serious cultural development is possible.
Yeah, so it was the spark, just to start to change everything, because this first campaign with the huge banner and so on actually started like all this, development of the new ideas about this place. And now in 2019 it's the landscape changed completely. So would you like talk about this?
I mean, it was those times a proclamation of a positive future which was not planned yet, and those times we knew we can seriously proclaim here such a possible development, even though it was very unlikely to happen, but it had a serious possibility. So we those times, I remember the opening speech of those times when we put up a banner faking that this becomes a house of arts, culture, social infrastructure, neighborhood, that even the same speech we could still hold today. But those times it was congratulating to the city of Berlin that they managed to do it, and it was not true yet, but now years later it's basically true, and we could really say
put the charm on the city.
We said let's be clever, let's make a project where everybody's a winner, let's partner up and let's include all different needs. And we realized that even the city of Berlin itself has a need of administration, has a need of schools and education. During the last years, we learned a lot also about the important needs of the city itself. And we learned to partner up and to move from campaign to cooperation and to try to set up a serious cooperation where in the end everybody's a winner. Nobody has to give up with a certain position. It's rather finding a compromise which sets up a complex situation where we all work together and learn from each other. And so far that succeeded, and hopefully it will continue. Let's see.
Oh yeah. What's the situation right now? What is happening right now in the Haus der Statistik?
So right now, the urban design is decided, kind of how will the future quarter will look like.
It was a competition?
It was a competition held by 3 planner teams, but it was more like a really dialogue in this competition. It was not like usually where planners get a task and the competition task, and then they just go into their offices and plan. But there were several forms of participation where they had to show what are they working on in public. And we also made several workshops on questions how should this future look like questions okay, how do we want to live or something. So this was decided in 2019, and right now the city is working on the development plans in order to set the legal framework for the new buildings which will happen there. But in the meantime, we can use the ground floor levels as a first trial, and to it's called pioneer phase, and to kind of experience do it in practice and learn from that, like what we want in the quarter.
But what's the space of this ground floors? Because it's like 2,000 square meters, even more. How big is it?
8,500.
8,000 square meters just from the ground floor.
Yeah.
It's like it's huge. It's huge. But actually, the future development, because it's like this huge building is existing, which would be like redeveloped and adapted for new things. And actually, there will be like 2 new buildings constructed.
More.
Yeah, more. Basically, almost the same size is going to be restructured on the backside of the building, which was totally empty so far, just a parking place, and 2 flat archive buildings, which probably will be demolished to create space for huge social housing. So we have around.
It will be like the new thing, because
the new
old
thing.
building will be like the offices.
Old building will stay. I mean, that was clear from the beginning, but the development plan was about the new buildings that could be added on the backside. And that puts about the same size again there. So we have 50,000 of existing building and another around 50 to 60,000 of new building that is added.
Oh, it's big. I think I saw in Germany some very similar project, like a similar idea, but actually it was about completely different thing, because it is like Nordbahn in Wuppertal. It's like a community created like a linear park from the old railway road, and it was like sponsored by the EU government, local government, city, and so on. But actually, it was like a very local idea, and which profits. Park does not brings any profit, but actually gives to the inhabitants like a new space for recreation and so on. But actually, the things you do is very similar, but in like in the building, which is so I think this is like shows like a very different approach of the like German local authorities to this kind of space. Because in Poland we have lots of like empty buildings, and actually everyone thinks, oh, let's wait, like let it fall, and then we will see what can we do next. And actually I like the idea that actually until just before the building collapsed, you started to recreate it. And actually the next thing to do in the building is what, like creating the designs for all these big buildings, or like what's the future, the nearest future?
So the nearest future is right now to work on ground with these pioneer users, which are already there, to establish like kind of the first users, to find out what kind of spaces do we need then actually, like what is the software of this whole new piece of city, and like what kind of organizational forms do we need, what kind of shared spaces do we need, like how can we even share spaces, what is the common idea, even like to develop this further. And then like what is already starting, because we only use the ground floor levels, it's already starting to renovate the other floors. Like they were right now ripping out all of the inner walls and second ceilings and everything. So they will start to reestablish, renew the existing structure. And when the development is done, development plan is done, then the first buildings can be set up. But also for that, it's also there should be. For some, for example, there will be a new town hall. For that, there has to be a competition about the architecture of that. Also for the housing, I don't know, if there is a competition or not, but still this should be also open and discussed. So I think these are the next steps.
Oh, yeah. another idea behind your project, I think, is like some kind of anti-gentrification movement. And I think this for me, it's very similar thing, which happened like in Ireland, like in the 70s. It was like Temple Bar, which was like a very central district of old houses, which was planned to be demolished to create like a bus station in the very heart of the, and the local artists and the locals started to like protest against it. And then like they took this oldest building, and after like all this 30 years, and now there's like the very hype neighborhood and with the best parties in Europe and super expensive, and actually it was like a crawling gentrification. No one had any idea about gentrification in the 70s, and then actually it happened. Don't you have like this? Don't you fear that this would happen to you? That actually you have a very good idea, just having all this, incorporating all these niches for the neighborhoods, for the locals, and so on and so on. And after like 10 years of your work, and someone will come and say, "Oh, we have a very nice building here. Let's sell it for $2 billion," and something like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. We are permanently trying to figure out how can we save the concept to make sure it's safe for decades. And the situation at the moment is that we are in a city center which is already highly expensive. I mean, the surrounding square meter price is like one of the most expensive of Berlin. So, and we're gonna make one of the cheapest areas probably in the city center, and we want to make sure that within all contracts and also within the development plan, cultural use and social infrastructure is set, and also set with a certain price. But of course, these are still some key parameters we have to define, and we have to make sure it really ends up in a serious contract. Which is not so easy to be changed, and at the same time also not easy to be sold. I mean, it's owned by the city of Berlin after a long term of dialogue, and at the moment at least the city of Berlin is not wanting to sell anymore any kind of land. Of course, this could also change. Therefore, even if we set it in the development plan, then it's even more safe. Even if a new owner would come, he can't easily change the use, you know. So we talk about all those things, and the nice part is that even our cooperation partners understand it and also want to make sure that all the effort we spend now is also safe for decades and not just for a few years.
Yeah. And I think like for the surrounding neighborhood, it's also like that many houses there are owned like public, they like by communal housing companies.
The neighborhood.
So then many of those houses are owned by them, and they are also like our cooperation partner. So, and they also like right now they don't sell anything. So, but I think this makes it also interesting, no? In city planning or urban planning, or like time is always changing, and there is a constant change, no? Something can be good, and in 50 years, we don't know.
Very long perspective. Okay, who is like because you're the part of like a managing board, or who is the managing the project right now? How does it, like an organization, how does it work? Because, you know, you have these partners like city management, city hall, and so on, but actually how does it work?
Well, the nice thing is that we really agreed on that all 5 corporation partners are on eye level working together. So there is no management on top.
Well, actually, I mean, like, how does it, like, a scheme of organization? You know, because usually everyone, for instance, in Poland, they would say, okay, let's create a special company that will manage, or something like a society or whatever, just like, or fund, just to, you know, keep in charge. You have like a person responsible, and so on. And how does it work in your case?
It's a cooperation agreement among several partners, and everyone is responsible for everything.
Yeah, it's shared responsibility, which means also everybody has.
Do you work as a society or a fund or
Cooperative.
We are a cooperative, and we are one of the 5 cooperation partners. We have every 1-2 years we sign new contracts that are basically saving our content, which we were working on, and which is projecting the future plans and saving also all the future ideas and steps. And that's been so far a continuous path in a way. And we talk about maybe at some point for certain things to create a common cooperative. I mean, the city and civil society together. That has been one big wish from us since the beginning, but it turned to be quite difficult for the city to become a cooperative together with civil society. I mean, that's something which for them doesn't really work easily, or they are very skeptical. But we think it still could be interesting, at least for operating the whole new area. Maybe just the free spaces outside or the ground floors to be run under one collective framework. Yeah, but basically now all partners are separate but cooperating together in a collective responsibility.
Let's talk about commercialization of the space, because actually what happens on the ground floor, it's not the space available for free or only for I don't know, no profit organization and whatever. How does it work?
So we made a guideline together with the public and together with the board, because we established a board which is guiding us through this process, which is consisting of people which are in the cooperation partnership and people who are kind of representing these kind of programs what we have, people from arts and culture, people from the social affairs, people from education and fields, and people from the neighborhood, and now new 2 people from the field of climate and food. And together we created this kind of framework with, I think, 11 criterias, which are saying, okay, we want to have for example, we want to have this kind of diversity. We want to have representing all these users there. We want to have established users, but we also want to have people who never did something like that. And one of the main thing is that everything should be common good oriented. That means it shouldn't be profit oriented. So and of course the space is also not for free, because we don't have any public money or something for establishing everything. We have to do it by ourselves, and again with cooperation partners. So
So is Paweł Jaworski, who was interviewing you in the museum, said, is it possible to set up the Starbucks at your house?
No, because the Starbucks...
But just the coffee shop, is it possible?
Yeah, Starbucks is profit oriented, but if you do a coffee shop where you kind of establish a vocational training for some young people, and you have you sell fair coffee, and you cooperate with a neighborhood garden or something, then it's possible, because the use of that it's creating something how do you say it? It's creating more value.
Yeah.
So
okay, what would be your advice for the people who would go your path, who see very similar building in their neighborhood and say, okay, let's start something like this? How they should start? With the big banner, or I don't know, going to the media?
Well, I think you should choose whatever visibility is best in your individual context. But I think it really helps to be maximum visible and to be maximum integrative. also try to integrate the ideas of the neighbors, of the owners, of the city in a way. I mean, and try to convince people without losing your ideals, but try to show that an alternative is possible, and try to be realistic. And it really helps if you can scale up your idea. It helps if you are in the center, because then you're also in the center of the interest. It helps if you connect your project with some bigger content and with some relevance and political relevance in your local context. So it becomes really difficult to ignore your project, and it starts to be ideally at some point a project which is of relevance of every cooperation partner, and I think that's can become the key for success.
How can people reach you? What's your website address or email, telephone? How to get to you? Because like the source of the information, how to start something. All this the spaces for the renovation, and there's a lot of this kind of spaces around the world. So how they should start? How to reach to you?
So you can visit our website. It's www.hausderstatistik.org. You can also mail us. It's werkstatt@hausderstatistik.org. And you can as well just visit us, because we have an on-site office there.
Old school way.
Yeah, old school way. We are there
take a tram and go to us.
Yes, and I think this is the most efficient way, because then you can just talk to us.
Yeah, because you hold the meetings weekly, or
what kind of meeting?
No, because you organize all these meetings with people, and
so we are always reachable. No, we are working on site, and we are always, I think, open for a chat. And also we do there on site this kind of workshops. They are I don't know, not weekly, but every second week, sometimes weekly.
Yeah. I mean, different formats. If you check the website, there is also permanently a calendar and an archive of what happened. So it's very easy to participate, and from just pure information, after a while you become just an active co-worker, and probably in the future develop the project together with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.